All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Denali webinar for September 30th, 2015. Today we're going to be talking about the advantages of how Denali has the tools to help you prepare for year-end on a month-to-month basis as you're working with your accounting programs, doing your accounting work. We're going to go over some of the different tools that you do each month just to maintain the core accounting modules, and then that will get you ready for year-end, and we'll show you the simplicity of how Denali will help you with that and the simplicity of doing your year-end close so it's not such a hassle. My name is Jeremy Beislein. I am a trainer here at Cougar Mountain, and I will be your presenter today. We ask that you keep your questions. If you have any questions or comments, go ahead and put those in the chat. You can do that anytime throughout the webinar. And then at the end of the webinar, we'll have a quick Q&A, and I'll review the questions and give those answers out with the remaining time we have left. Any questions I don't get to before we run out of time, we'll get those answered for you and posted on the website, so you can check back with us there. All right, so with that, we'll go ahead and get started. Today we're going to be talking just a basic overview of how doing your monthly maintenance will simplify year-end. And when we get into the specifics of it, I'll show you how Denali can help you with that monthly maintenance to help minimize the workload involved with that. Of course, the first thing we want to do is a backup before we do any kind of monthly or year-end closes or purging or anything like that. We'll talk about that. Then we'll talk about the different maintenance tasks for each of the core accounting modules in Denali. Then at the end of the webinar, the final segment will be talking about general ledger maintenance and actually doing the year-end work for general ledger. There are one or two other year-end processes that you would run in the other modules, which will cover that as well and show you how Denali will help you with that. Okay, so with that, we will go ahead and get started here. All right, so year-end close. It's always a big hassle at the end of every year, and it seems to be something that we all look forward to. I know. As an accountant, my experiences that I've had, it's been a lot of fun, but it can definitely be more beneficial if you have the right software to help you with that at the end of the year. And with Denali, not only is it do you have the simplicity of the simple functions of year-end, but by running your month-to-month maintenances, you will have the year-end process simplified even more. Most of the work will be done for you. Now, the first thing we always stress is with any kind of software package, before you do any kind of a year-end or month-end process, always create a backup. And I always tell my clients when I'm training them, you can never have too many backups. If you ever question whether or not you need to undo something or need to create a restore point in the system, the solution is just simply create a backup. And then if you ever need to revert back to the point that you're at this moment, the backup will do that for you by restoring that backup. Anything that you have done since the backup can be undone simply by just restoring the backup. That is the #1 function of doing a backup for these month and year-end processes in Denali. And of course, not to mention the fact that the backup is also a good way to secure your data from any unforeseen events that may arise. Okay. Okay, so the first one we're going to talk about is how Denali will help you with maintaining your accounts receivable. Accounts receivable is always kind of a big one for most people because you're dealing with customer accounts, customer balances, and you have to maintain those balances and maintain those accounts throughout the year. And if you do that on a monthly basis in Denali, then the year-end processes are real simple in accounts receivable. The monthly process is the ones that you want to focus on for the accounts receivable module. So we'll talk a little bit about that. I'm going to switch over to my Denali here, and we're going to switch over to the accounts receivable module that I have open here. Now in Denali, there's some really nice tools to help you with your monthly processes. The #1 thing that you do in just about any accounting software is printing out and sending out monthly statements to your customers, showing them a detailed list of all the transactions for the current month, and the current account balance. It also has the aging at the bottom of your statements, as most accounting softwares has. Denali will have that as well. But Denali has a nice feature you can do prior to printing statements, is you can just automatically calculate. When I say automatic, it's sort of a semi-auto process. You have to click this icon here. But other than that, then you just go ahead and calculate your finance charges that you want to charge any customers who are past due. And the finance charge and the way Denali determines whether they're past due or not is based on the customer's terms that is set up in their account. You calculate the finance charges, you print out the monthly statements, and then you run the monthly control reports and aged analysis reports as needed for your files. That way you can keep that information on a monthly basis, so at the end of the year you've got all that information that you need. In Denali, you have the option to keep your items. We call that open items. Any transactions that post to a customer's account is saved in the open items table for that customer. And those transactions always print on the customer statements. Now, when the transaction is settled or paid in full, then it has what we call an amount remaining of 0. So if there's any amount remaining on an item that's not 0, the item will not be purged. But if the amount remaining is 0, you may want to get rid of those or clean up those older items that have been paid, those older invoices that customers have now paid. So after running your statements, as a monthly task, Denali has it set up that you have the option to clean up or purge those $0 items that have been paid, so they don't just keep adding on the monthly statements month after month. So all the new items are added, but the old items are still there as well. So to clean those up, we purge those open items for the previous month. And then after you run the purge, but remember, we always want to have a backup before doing any purging. So, like I mentioned earlier, always have a backup in place. After you run your purge, we run what is called the control report. What the control report does for you is it allows you to compare your total account balances for all customers with your accounts receivable account in your general ledger. So it's kind of a check and balance. The control report will also run a calculation of your open items to compare that with the total customer balance to make sure that those numbers are equal. If there's any problem with those numbers and they are not equal, the control report will show us that. And it will show us we have an error on this customer's account because their total account balance does not equal the total of all their open items that are still unpaid. So right now it is running that calculation to process for our control report. And then the control report pops up here, and there we have it. And as you can see, this control report is not showing me any errors. So all I am seeing is total balances for each of my general ledger accounts receivable accounts. Now in my demo company, I have 3 different what we call AR codes, which are tagged to my general ledger accounts. So now I just compare that number for each of these codes to my totals in my general ledger on my balance sheet to see if those numbers match. Just for today's example, let's go ahead and compare AR code A2. To get a better example, let me run this out to the end of my fiscal calendar here, because there may be future transactions in my demo company that are not included on this report unless I go out on the date. Oh, of course, I got it open. I need to close it first. Okay, so I am going to run my control report to include my entire fiscal calendar this time. Looks like it's the same. Very good. So I don't have any future transactions. Now, with that, I'm going to double check the account for A2. So I'm going to bring up A2 here. We're going to look at account number 1105 in the general ledger, which is the A2 account, and there's my balance, $3,638.46, $3,638.46, which matches my control report. So I do that for A1 and GB as well to get me my totals for accounts receivable. This right here is the total accounts receivable balance I have in my accounts receivable, and as we saw for A2, it matches the general ledger. So it's just a simple check and balance you run, and as you can see, Denali has these tools in place for you to do these checks and balances each month, so that by the time you get to the end of the year, every month you've been balanced. If it's not in balance, we can fix it in the current month so that we're not trying to figure it out for the whole year at the end of the year. We don't have to figure out what month it was thrown out to fix it by doing a simple journal entry. A couple of things that are nice about Denali is if your control report is showing any errors, there is a very simple way to fix those errors just by recalculating your customer's master balance. You just simply run a recalculate, and this recalculate takes all of your open items and it adds them up to recalculate the total balance due to the customer. And then you run that control report, and if there's any discrepancies between this accounts receivable and your general ledger, you just simply do a simple journal entry to fix that. So now, what about the end of the year? Well, Denali's accounts receivable, there's not a whole lot of year-end stuff you have to do because we're doing it every month. We're purging open items, we're running our statements, we're running our control reports, and doing our check and balance. So at the end of December, we just do our regular monthly maintenance. Then you've got other options once you've closed out the year for your whole organization. If you wanted to reset some of your accumulators that you have in Denali, you can do that, but those are optional. You don't have to do that. You can also purge the old history from the previous year when you closed out the year, or if you want to keep your history from several years back, you just purge the history from, say, 2010. I'm going to keep everything for 5 years, but anything older than 5 years I'm going to purge. But again, always run a backup before purging any old history. Now the history is the actual transactions that are posted to the customer's account. So when you purge open items, it doesn't purge the transaction from their account. It just clears it off of their open items table, which means it will no longer print on their monthly statements, or it will no longer show up in the aged analysis reports. But the history is still there until you actually purge the history. So those are some really nice tools you have in accounts receivable for year end, and if you're running your monthly maintenance, no problem. We can go ahead and do the year end maintenance, just our regular monthly for December, and the end of the year, all the work is already done. So we're not scrambling to sort it out at the end of the year. All right, so our next category is our year end preparation for accounts payable. So accounts payable is actually simpler than accounts receivable. Since you're not running monthly statements in accounts payable, we don't have to worry about purging open items every month, but you have that option. You can still purge vendor invoices that you have already paid from your open items table, but they're still in the history. So the transaction information is still there. It just cleans up your aged analysis reports from the open items is basically what that'll do for you. But again, make sure you run a backup before doing any purging. However, what about your accounts payable accounts? Your total accounts payable liability, you want to compare that with your accounts payable accounts in the general ledger on the balance sheet to make sure they match. So we have a control report in accounts payable also. It works just like the one in accounts receivable. The first thing we're going to see is a list of all of our accounts payable codes which are linked to the liability accounts in general ledger. I have a code for KW, a code for P1, and a code for P2. These are all linked to accounts payable accounts in general ledger. As you can see, my accounts are labeled payroll liabilities, accounts payable. We have another payroll liabilities account in the GL. Not quite sure what that's for, but but this is my main accounts payable code. We've labeled it P1 in the demo company. So my total accounts payable balance for this code should be $2583.51. So it's a simple matter of just checking the P1 code just like we did in accounts receivable and making sure that that balance sheet balance matches what my accounts payable control report is showing. And there we have $2583.51, which, as you can see, matches my code here. So what I'm looking at here is the actual general ledger liability account for that accounts payable code. And so this is what my balance sheet number is going to show on the general ledger. So it's a simple check and balance. Everything is good. If there are any errors on this control report, if there's any open items from vendors that don't match what the total vendor balance is, accounts payable has the same function in Denali as accounts receivable. We can recalculate those balances to fix those errors. And this is an automated process. But again, I cannot stress it enough. Make sure you have a backup in place before running any of these month-end functions. Then if you would like to purge your open items each month in accounts payable, you can also do that as well. All right, moving on. What about inventory? Inventory is just almost as simple, if not more so, than accounts payable. Oh, let me backtrack a little. I didn't talk about year-end in accounts payable. So I'm going to backtrack and go over that real quick. The only accounts payable functions you have in year-end is to purge the history, reset year-to-date vendor totals, which is for 1099 vendors, and clear out any temporary vendors you have for the current year. So those are your year-to-date functions you have, and Denali has these automatically set up for you. But what about your 1099 vendors? If you need to issue 1099s at the end of the year, Denali has the capability of doing that for you. Forms created right here in Denali. You don't have to purchase any other special software for that, and you can generate those forms and distribute those to your vendors right here in Denali. You can also generate the 1096 form and file that with the IRS as well. And there's even an option to electronically file your 1099 forms with the IRS. So these are some year-end options that are included in the accounts payable module in Denali. Once you process those forms, then you would reset those year-to-date vendor totals to reset the 1099s for the new year. And you'll do that once all of your year-end processing is completed. All right, so back to inventory. Inventory, we've got the same functionality here. We're going to run a control report to match the inventory with the inventory asset account in our general ledger to make sure that the total value of our inventory matches. So we have several different inventory codes, which means we probably have several inventory asset accounts in general ledger. And we just match these numbers with the account, just like we saw in accounts receivable and account payable, to make sure that this is the balance on our balance sheet for this inventory code. And then we get a total at the bottom here for our total book value of all of our inventory items, which is going to be a combined total of all of our inventory asset accounts in general ledger. So you just compare this report with general ledger to make sure they match every month. If they don't match, a simple journal entry will correct that. Again, this report will show any errors for any items where the quantity for the item does not match the open items for the transactions that are posted. But in this case, we can see there were no errors detected, so we are good to go there. However, if you have any errors on the report, so if our total quantity for an item doesn't match the ins and outs of every transaction, again, Denali has a really nice option to just simply recalculate the quantity for your items. And it will add up all the transactions that are posted for that items for the ins and outs to recalculate the total quantity on hand, which will also update the value if needed. So inventory is very simple. Year-end in inventory, the only option we really have is purge history. Now, if you're using a standard cost for your valuation method, you can also reset the variance amounts for the standard cost. Any other valuation methods, such as FIFO, LIFO, or weighted average, the variation amounts will never apply. That only applies for standard cost. You can also reset that at the end of the year and then purge any old history if you would like. In our other example for accounts receivable, I can keep the history for as far back as I want to go and just purge anything prior to the date that I put here. There is no open item purge in inventory, so it's an even simpler process. All right, moving on. Our next one we have is our payroll. Payroll is a little more of a process because, you know, in payroll, you've got all kinds of payroll tax forms you have to run at the end of the year. Your W-2 forms, your fourth quarter 941s, your 940s, all of the tax forms that are required to be run. Denali has all of the tools built in for you to run those automatically. For every quarter, You can run your 941 forms just by launching the Atrix application that comes with the Payroll module. You just select which tax form you want to run here. The form automatically populates with the information as needed, and it will automatically have all the numbers filled in, and then you just simply submit that form by either printing it out and sending it off, or you can e-file that form based on what kind of a Atrix system you have set up with your Denali Payroll. For more information on that, then see our webinar that deals with the month-end and year-end processes for payroll. We actually have a special webinar we've done for that already. So due to the interest of time, I'm not going to go into the details on this webinar. But Denali does have those options available. All of your payroll tax forms are included with the Denali Payroll module. When you're ready to process your W-2s at the end of the year, you just simply run that W-2 form. And it's going to be right here, that one right there. With Denali, you can also select a previous year if you'd like to run the W-2 form for the previous year. My demo data only goes back to 2014, so those are the only options I have. Now, the reason why the only options I have on the forms to run is 2014 is because we're barely in September. Atrix does not update their W-2s till December. So about the middle of December, you'll see the option here in the drop-down to run the 2015 W-2 forms. And then once all of your tax forms are run and all of your payroll is completed, then you just simply run the year-to-date reset in payroll to reset all of those numbers for quarters 1 through 4, and then it will start you off for the next year. What's great about Denali, though, is you don't have to do this year-end process in payroll right on December 31st. You can continue on January 1st all the way up until March 31st before processing your year-ends in Denali. Because Denali has a 5th quarter in the payroll module that will process all of your new year's information in the 5th quarter. Then when you run this reset, it takes out quarters 1 through 4 and zeroes those out, and then it takes everything in the 5th quarter and it just moves it back to quarter 1 and rolls your calendar here in the payroll module to the new year. So at the end of 2015, when I do that reset, then this number is going to automatically change to 2016, and everything I've done for 5th quarter in 2015 will just be moved to 1st quarter in 2016. Quarters 1 through 4 will be reset for 2016. And those are automated processes that you can do here in the Denali Payroll module so that you don't have to go through and manually reset anything. But again, make sure you have a backup in place before you run this reset. Okay, so now the next one we have is we've got the other modules that don't really have year-end processes, but you can run period-end processes for those as needed. Some of the other modules involved are like the bank rec. Well, yeah, we do have the bank rec module. You do want a monthly maintenance on that one. We'll talk about that for a minute. Every month, to keep your bank reconciliation module up to date, so at the end of the year, it's just a simple rollover to the new year. The simple process in bank rec is just reconcile your bank statement every month, which is what you will do in any system. So Denali has a nice bank reconciliation option. You just simply clear the items that are marked on the bank statement, or the showing on the bank statement is cleared. Once you've reconciled your bank statement, you print out your reconciliation report, post the reconciliation. After that is completed, you just want to do a double check, real simple. We don't have to do a control report in BankRec because all we're checking is the bank account balance in BankRec with the cash account in General Ledger to make sure they match. And Denali has your numbers right here in the bank account setup. You've got the current balance for BankRec and the current GL cash account, which is our 1010 account in General Ledger here, showing the balance there. And Denali actually shows that right here in the BankRec module, so we don't actually have to switch out to the GL account to see that. We can see that just by looking at these two numbers here. As long as those numbers match, we're good. If those numbers do not match, then a simple journal entry will correct the GL balance to fix it. The top number we know is right because our bank statement reconciled. So therefore, that top number is automatically updated for all transactions that post to BankRec, and if our bank statements reconcile, that number is correct. If for some reason our bank statements don't reconcile, we have to enter a transaction to fix that. And if the two numbers are off, we just make a simple journal entry to fix those in the general ledger. The other modules, sales, purchase order, and job cost, it's just a matter of cleaning up the information at the end of the year. Purge old history, purge old holds, old deposit journals, things like that in sales. In purchase order, it's just a matter of purging history. There's no other options that we really need to worry about to clean up in purchase order. And then in job cost, all we do there is just delete the old jobs that were no longer, that are completed, basically. We'll go through and just look at our jobs. As we complete a project in job cost, you just simply delete that job if you'd like, or if you want to keep that, you can. That's entirely up to you. And that's done here in the job master. Once the job is completed, we can delete that project. What's nice about job cost is there is a safety involved. If I try to delete this job here, it's going to say you cannot delete this record because the job has not been completed yet. So that saves us from deleting something we don't want to. But once the job has been completed, we can then go through and delete the completed jobs. Just basically a cleanup task, so that at the end of the year, your accounting system is all nice and clean and ready to go. Okay, so the final one we got to talk about is our biggest accounting module that we do at the end of every year, and that is our general ledger. Now, to keep the general ledger updated, this is where you're going to run your year-end financial reports that you're going to submit to your auditor or CPA in order for them to get your income tax forms completed and taken care of for the end of the year, and also to do your complete and closeouts of the year-end. The main closeout function at year-end is done right here in the general ledger module. So what we want to do is to make sure that when we do our year-end close, our accounts are always in balance. The big thing we want to make sure is that we don't have an out-of-balance issue in the general ledger, which you should never have. And it's just simply by running a trial balance each month to make sure that our trial balance report is balanced. The trial balance is going to show all accounts, not just balance sheet accounts, but also all of your income and expense accounts as well. You'll see that on this report, and then you will see whether the report is in balance. So at the end of each month, we just simply want to look at the trial balance, run to the bottom of the report, and make sure everything is in balance. So we just, here's all of our accounts with the account balances, and it shows whether it's a debit balance or a credit balance on the account. So we drop down to the bottom of this report, and we just want to make sure that we're in balance. And look at that. We have an out of balance already showing. Now, we did that on purpose for the demo company because we had another presentation where we show how it is possible to fix an out of balance. So for more information on that, just look at the webinar to correct an out of balance. But if you ever see an out of balance on your trial balance, we got a problem. And if you're running this every month, you only have to narrow it down to the current month that you're running it for. If you wait till the end of the year, then we got to sort through a whole year's worth of entries to find that out of balance. So if we're running this every month, we will see that we'll know, okay, last month we were in balance, but now this month we're out of balance, so now we got a problem. If I go clear back to the first month, we are in balance for January, so we're good there. No out of balance showing. And that's the goal, is to just look at this trial balance report every month, make sure that it's in balance. And that is your general ledger maintenance. That's pretty much all you got to do to keep the general ledger. Some of the options you can do in general ledger is you actually switch out to controller. You can actually block the previous month every month to make sure that nothing is posting to a month that you don't want it to post to. So in this example, my present period is actually month 9, which is period 9, which is September. That's where we're at today. So I don't want anything to post prior to September 1st, so I'm going to block period 8, which blocks everything from August 31st back. So nothing is now posting. I basically closed out August just by blocking it. That's all you have to do to close it out. There's no transactions or anything you have to do unless you need to make any month-end journal entries. That's something you may need to do, but typically all you do is block the month. Now nothing can post to the general ledger, or any module for that matter, from August 31st back. It has to be dated September 1st or later in order for it to post. And of course you say, well, I blocked it now. What if I need to unblock it because I need to post something for August? We just simply go in and unblock it. But in order to unblock it, you have to be a user logged in that has rights to the fiscal calendar and controller. So your regular user, by not giving them rights to that, you can block any periods so that none of your regular users will be able to post to anything prior to a certain month. So every month we've gone through, our trial balance is in balance. Well, not really, because we just looked at it, but we'll pretend it is. I'm going to leave that for now because that is for demonstration purposes. And now it's time to close out the year. So at the end of the year, what we want to do in Denali, it's a real simple process. We want to run our backup first. We can also make what's called a history company. A history company is a mirror image of your current company file that you leave open prior to the year-end close. That way, you can access any historical data so that in your current company, when you purge the data, the history, that history is still available in your history company. So we're going to say history 2015, and then we'll call the code year-end 2015. That'll be our company code. So when I create this history company, it makes a mirror image of my company file labeled History 2015 or YE 2015. Then when I go into my companies, I will see that there, and it's real simple. I can just log in anytime to that history company if I want to look at any historical data that was purged in my current company. So that is always a very good step, making this history company before processing your year-end close. And it's real quick and simple. Now, anytime I go into Denali, I now have my history company I can look at, rather than just my regular company, if I need to look at any historical data. Once we've done our history company, and we've got all of our other monthly maintenance tasks completed throughout the month, throughout the year, and we're now ready to close the year, Denali, it's real simple. We just simply click Close Company Year. Now there's a warning here. We cannot close the company year because the year isn't over yet. Isn't that nice? So if we were actually in 2016 right now, you would have that option to close the company year. And you just simply click that button, put in the retained earnings account you want to post the net income to, and then you just hit process. Denali will automatically zero out all revenue and expense accounts in your general ledger with a single posting, and the net income will post to the retained earnings account, and then it will roll your fiscal calendar forward by 1 year when you run that year-end process. So right now my fiscal calendar is on 2015 for the current year. After I close 2015, the current year now becomes 2016. Year 2 will become 2017, and so forth. And that is simply done with a single click of the mouse in the general ledger module by closing out the year. So as you can see, Denali makes all of that year-end processing. It automates that for you, makes it simple, and it cleans everything up for the new year, so you're ready to go. So that's pretty much it. One more thing I'm going to say real quick is if you are one of our clients that use the fund accounting suite, everything we talked about is pretty much the same except for there is one thing about the year-end close. So I'm going to switch over to the fund general ledger. So anyone who has the fund accounting in Denali, to close out the year, it's a little bit more of a process because you don't simply close out your organization to zero out your revenue and expense accounts. You have to do that for each fund individually. And again, we can't do it because we're in the current year. So you would close out each fund's revenue and expense accounts separately. Once that is done, then you close out the year, which simply rolls the fiscal calendar to the next year. But other than that, everything else is just pretty much the same of what we covered. So Denali keeps that for you. What's great about the fund accounting is it does allow you to track your funds separately, and you can close those out separately. You may even have a different calendar for funds separately, which Denali can do that for you. And that's why you must close out each fund separately rather than just closing them all out in one step. Okay, so that pretty much completes the presentation here today. Let me just switch back over here. Okay, so let's look at our questions that we have here. Okay, so there's a good question here from Mike. He says, is there a recommended procedure for a SQL backup and restore? That is a great question, Mike. With Denali, when you're running the backup in Denali, it's basically doing that very thing. It's backing up your Denali's SQL database. The data that you have for Denali in your SQL, it runs that backup for you. And it saves it as a cabinet file. So you can save that wherever you need to go. It simply just takes the data in the SQL for Denali and it runs the backup. Now, if you have the SQL Management Studio or some other SQL programs that can back up the SQL database, then there may be other options for backing up your data that way as well. But Denali has the option to do that with the backup here. So, another question from Kobe, can I print the PowerPoint presentation? Oh, okay. That's a good question. Basically, what we're going to do, Kobe, is when we post this webinar on the website, we will also include the PowerPoint presentation on the website. And if you have PowerPoint on your computer, you just simply download the PowerPoint presentation and print it out on your system. So. Question from Sheila. Why not have a report that does this comparison between AR total and GL total? Seems silly to have to open another report to compare. So you're talking about the control report. Basically, that's what the control report does. It's just basically showing you what the AR balances are for each of your AR codes. Now, the reason we don't have it compared to GL is because you might not have the GL module. A lot of our clients, all they have is sales and accounts receivable. So there is no general ledger report to compare it to in that case. They would compare it to whatever other general ledger system they're using outside of Denali. And if you wanted to, you could simply run the balance sheet in general ledger, and then it has all of your balance sheet accounts right there ready to go. So when you're running your control reports from any module, such as AR, AP, and inventory, you'll just look at the balance sheet total and see if that works, if they match. So, question from Karen. When open items are purged, can you still see the invoices on the customer account and in the AR history report? Another great question, and the answer to that is absolutely yes. What's great about Denali is when you purge open items, it does not purge the history. So all we're doing is we're purging the open items so that it cleans up our monthly statement, but it does not purge the history, so you can still open up a customer's account and bring up their invoice from the sales history. Let's see if I can find one real quick to show you as an example here. I go to OEPOS history, and I can find an invoice that's like old. Here's one. I don't have anything older than the current month on this customer. Bad example. But as you can see, the information here would still be here if you purged open items, even with the $0 amounts. And you just simply double-click on that line item, and there's the invoice. You can see it right there on the screen. Let me get my scroll bar here so we can scroll down to see the whole invoice there. So yes, that would still be in history. Now, if you decide you're going to purge history, be careful with this because that will erase it from the customer's history. So when I go back to 2010, everything since 12/31/2010 is still in history. It's only going to get rid of the old stuff that's 5 years old or older. So a lot of people, when they're purging history, they'll keep several years still in there just to have easy access. But even if you purge history, remember, we still have a copy company that we can open and pull that invoice from there. So there's lots of different safeguards to keep that history safe for you as needed. Okay, Jackie, AP, can you run an aging report after the date and still see a snapshot of the date? With Denali, as transactions are posting, your aging report is only going to show what the current state of your accounts payable module is. So that's why we do recommend running those aging reports every month for each month to make sure you have that report available when needed. And remember, with Denali, you can save those reports as a file if needed. So when I'm running my aging report for September 30th, for example, 09/30/2015, then I am going to see this report. I can print it, I can run it to the screen, or I can save that as a file. So that would be a good way to keep historical aging reports so that when data posts to the database, those numbers as they change, you can still see the snapshot of that report from the file you saved. Sheila, that's a good question. Why not have a choice to show zero balance on the reports instead of purging? I assume you're talking about open items. That is a good question. And with Denali, you have that option right here. Vendor total due or items remaining. So when I'm running my aging report in accounts payable, I can say, even though I haven't purged open items, I don't want to see any items on this report that have a zero balance. So exclude those items. So you do have that option. The purging just helps keep the open items table cleaned up. All right, sounds good. Where can I get a paper copy of the year-end process and a copy of the presentation? Check the website, cougarmountain.com. Under Resources Webinars, you'll see a copy of this presentation there in a couple of days. And a paper copy of year-end processes. What I would do on that is I would go to cougarmountainservice.com and go to documentation and download the user guides for each of the modules. It does show the information on that. And with that, we are out of time, guys. There's a couple more questions, so I'm going to have to put the answers on the website. So I will go ahead and get these answers up for you in a couple days. When this presentation is posted on the website, just check back, and you'll see the questions to the answers posted as well. So with that, go to Cougar Mountain Monthly Webinar Series. That's where we're going to post our webinar, and you can also see what other webinars we have coming up there. So be sure to check out the website. And if you have any questions or comments, give us a call. You can call your account representative or the sales line there. You can also give us an email, send an email for that as well. And so with that, I want to thank everyone for showing up today. Keep an eye out for follow-up communication and for this webinar. It will be recorded at the website. Thank you so much, guys. Have a great day. We'll see you on the next one.